Hi and welcome to the Northern Magpie. My name's Karen, and on this channel we talk mainly about crochet and amigurumi, but you never know. A couple other projects might sneak in now and then, possibly some cross stitch, some black work, some knitting, maybe even some sculpting or fabric dyeing, who knows. So today I wanted to talk about a pretty big project that I took on. I'm a member of an online pony breeding dress up game called Pony Island. And this game has been around for 22 years. And every year they have this tradition of celebrating the birthday, which is March 13th, by having an art contest. And mixed media is kind of where I fit in. I don't usually do traditional art just because I'm not that great at it. This would be, I think, my fifth time entering the contest. There's kind of a running joke on the site that there are raptors running around behind the scenes, causing chaos, making a mess, spreading glitter around. And when I heard that the theme for this year's contest was chaos or personal style, I immediately thought of the raptors, and I thought that I wanted to do something with a raptor. So the idea that I ended up with was to have a pony with a birthday cake getting ready to celebrate the birthday, and a sneaky raptor kind of coming in trying to steal the cake. So in order to do this, I needed three main components. One being the raptor, the second component being the pony, and then the third main component being the cake itself. So the first component that I'll talk about that I did was the cake. So the pattern that I ended up using for the cake was the Crochet Birthday Cake by Cause Family on Etsy. And the first part that I made was the base of the cake. And this was the first base that I crocheted for the cake. This is Mary Maxim Starlet yarn, which is a worsted weight yarn, and I used a 3.75 millimeter hook. And I just figured this is way too small. So I decided to do it again. And this time I used blanket yarn, and we ended up with something a lot bigger. Unfortunately, as a running theme in this whole project, I ran out of time. So I ended up going with just the ice cream cones. I found the instructions for the icing to be very confusing. I couldn't quite follow them. Now that could be entirely due to my inexperience. At that point, I'd only been crocheting for about a month. So what I ended up doing was just doing a string of baubles, also in blanket yarn. And I was pretty happy with how that turned out as far as icing goes. I absolutely love how the ice cream cones turned out. My family actually said that they looked like they were real. So the pattern for the candles is called Crochet Candles, and it is by, I'm sorry, I have to check my notes, Ala Shashkevich Toys, I think I'm saying that correctly, on Etsy. The actual pattern called for a very tall candle holder with this candle in the top, and what I did was I basically just started the pattern at the bottom of the candle and crocheted the candle. The bottom part of the candle here is a worsted weight yarn, and then the top part is DK cotton. The pattern for the numbers is just a pattern called Numbers, and it's by Studio Nisk on Etsy. I found the pattern for the turn at the bottom of the two. Here, I'll put this up here so you can see. The turn at the bottom of the two, I found it very confusing, and it was actually, once I figured it out, it was actually very difficult to do because at one point you have 13 loops on your hook, but I'm pretty happy with how they turned out. The second component of the pattern was the raptor, and I actually have showed this in my second video where I talked about everything I crocheted in my first month crocheting, but I've done more to it since then. So here is the raptor head, and I'll hold it up here so you can see the eyes, hopefully. This pattern was called Roy the Raptor by Marley Bird, and it's a pretty cool pattern, but I did have some difficulty with understanding parts of it. And while I know a lot of that is due to my inexperience, there were no pictures in the pattern to help you figure out how things go together. The only pictures in the pattern were actually photos of the finished item. So there were some parts that I found very confusing. Would have been a lot easier if there was some sort of a diagram or a photo or something in the pattern just to kind of show you how it was supposed to go together. The other part was the teeth. I found the instructions for the teeth really confusing. I actually didn't manage to figure it out. These teeth are actually from a different pattern, which was the Flying Eyeball Monster by Crafty Tibbles. I took the teeth from that pattern and basically doubled the length of it so that it would stretch around the front of the mouth. And forgot to mention that I actually hand painted these eyes. I'll get behind it so you can see. So these were painted with metallic paints, and it was done on a 30mm glass cabochon because I couldn't find any 30mm snake pupil safety eyes, and it's a dinosaur. I figured he really needs to have the snake eyes. So also I have 2 feet done. Once again, I ran out of time and I wasn't able to finish the whole raptor. At this point, my skills have improved quite a bit, and I'm actually debating just completely redoing the feet and the head, and then at that point finishing the whole raptor, because I do want to finish the whole raptor. But I see a lot of things that I would do differently if I were to do it again. So I suspect that might be the way that I go. The component of this project that was the most difficult for me, though, was the pony itself. I needed a pony pattern that would be able to show some sort of emotion because I wanted the pony to look surprised. I wanted it to be shocked because of the chaos that was about to ensue from the raptor stealing the cake. So the first pony pattern that I tried was by Crafty Intentions, and I believe it's just called Pony. I'm not sure. I've seen a couple of different names for it. It also goes by Pony, Unicorn, Alicorn. But so this, I got this far with it. It's on a worsted weight yarn, and while I really like the shaping of it, the pose was just too static for what I was looking for this project. This is a pattern that I plan to revisit in the future and maybe use a little bit more exciting yarn. So at this point, I started looking for a different pattern. I ended up with the Beloved Horse pattern by Loop Loom Crochet, and I was pretty happy with the posing that I was able to do with this one. I was going for a surprised look, and I think I achieved that. She looks kind of shocked, surprised to me. But I did have a lot of problems with this pattern. And there are a lot of things that I would change if I was to do this pattern again. The biggest thing for me, I think, is the armature, the wire armature that's in this pony. So you're trying to crochet in this very small tube with a wire sticking out the middle, which makes it really difficult. I found the wire was constantly moving around. Trying to stuff around the wire evenly was really difficult, I found. And then when you connect the wires from the legs onto the wire from the body, and then you're crocheting around these 4 legs and trying to sew it up the middle here, I was constantly knocking the connections loose. The legs were constantly coming off the body wire. If I were to do this again, I would come at the armature from the same perspective as somebody who is doing a clay sculpture, a polymer clay sculpture. That is the kind of background that I come from. I believe I have some photos of the last time that I did an armature for a polymer clay sculpture. And if I do, I'll put them up on the screen. I find that the head is a little bit too big for the body. I find it's out of proportion. I'm not so sure about the back end here. It just seems like the legs are too wide at the top to really kind of blend in together. It's possible that it has to do with the way that I attached them, because it doesn't really look like that in the pattern. I found the way that the pattern indicated to add the mane and the tail was quite confusing, and with how tight the stitches are, it was really difficult to get a crochet hook in there to add the mane and tail the way they were asking me to. So what I ended up doing is I ended up sewing in the mane. I don't know if you can see. I ended up sewing in the mane just one strand at a time using some of the body yarn. So would I make this pattern again? Honestly, I probably won't, just because it was really a lot of work and it was a struggle for me. So that was my project. I ended up, because I was running out of time, I ended up not getting everything done that I was hoping to get done, but I'm pretty happy with what I was able to produce. So I'm sure you saw it already in the thumbnail, but I'll put up on the screen what my final project ended up looking like. Unfortunately, I didn't win, but I did learn so much doing this project, and I had a lot of fun doing it. So I'm really glad I did it. Anyways, that's it for me for this week. I'm really glad that you were able to join me, and I hope you'll subscribe, give me a like if you like this video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye. I'm having so much trouble talking. You know, there's been so many bloopers in the recording of this video. I'm starting to think maybe I should add some bloopers at the end. Check the notes. Check the notes. And I found the instructions. Oops. We'll pretend that didn't happen. Why am I having so much trouble? Anyways, that's it for me for this week. Wow.